business.
Great. So we're going to be recording that, Liz, if that's okay with everyone. And if you're okay to put yourselves on mute during it, that would be great. I'm delighted to see you all. I'm going to go straight into the theme. So today we're looking at changing consumer and client behaviour as a result of the pandemic. I know we've touched on this theme quite a lot in previous sessions, right back from March. But it's not going away. It's still really important. It's still really important to share the research that other companies are doing and the way others are adapting to it with others. So it's something that everyone's it's at the front of everyone's minds, and it's what we're asked most about. So I'm really delighted to have two amazing speakers today. We've got Lauren Raby from Coca-Cola, and we have Dan Taylor from SALT.agency, so more local to us here. And Lauren's going to give us a really good case study from Coca-Cola about their research findings, what they've noticed about changing in consumer behaviour and from this new remote working world that we're living in, and sort of talk us through how they've adapted to that, with a view in mind that people could kind of steal these ideas and adapt them for their businesses. And Dan is going to talk to us from a B2B point of view, but also a bit of B2C, of the things he's found working with his clients and how he's helped clients respond to changing behaviours. So hopefully it'll be useful and that you'll have some good practical tips to use for your own business. Feel free to ask questions through the chat, but there will be time at the end to ask questions directly, I'm sure. So I'm going to pass over now to Lauren.
Thank you, Jess. I will just share my screen. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. So thank you very much for having me, and hi everyone. I'm just going to give a really quick run through on how we reacted as a business within my insights department, but also a few of the things we found from our consumer tracker. So just a little bit about me. I've been with Coca-Cola for coming up to 4 years now, and I've had a couple of different roles whilst I've been there. Always on the insights team within strategy and insights. I've been focused on consumer behaviour, a lot on new product performance tracking, and in my most recent role, business intelligence. And I also co-hosted a market research podcast this year, so I'm just giving it a little plug if anybody would like to go and have a listen, called In the Name of Insight, and it's on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Yeah, I will go straight into our response as a business. So the first thing we did is we came together and worked as an EMEA team. So all of the leaders from across our different EMEA offices got together, and we thought about what's the best way that we can share our findings. So we actually did sort of an interview series with the directors of the insights teams, just put in business questions and also general questions towards them so we could really understand what happened in their markets. And then we also did some videos with consumers where they showed us around their homes and really let us see exactly what it was like for them, so pre-lockdown and within lockdown. And then from all of that, we compiled some trends that we thought to be global so that we could really all work to the same framework. And then within Western Europe, which is the team I'm in, we shifted focus. So we stopped doing a lot of ad hoc brand work. We shifted to go into all of our continuous data sources because we were shifting our priority in terms of our team's work and also our budgets. And then we formed a COVID-19 response team, which was the team I'm on. And we also went silent with our campaigns. So there was no need for us to do campaign tracking anymore. So we switched that up and we used that track to track people's responses to COVID-19. So that's a daily consumer tracker. So when we were thinking about what we needed to know as a business, we used those trends and that framework that we had built. So there's a lot of text on the slide, so I'm not going to go into it in detail. The trends are trends that we're seeing across the globe. It's probably nothing new to you. What we just did was tailor each of them so we understood how it was within each of the regions. And then we also added our business context and formed some hypotheses. So just a couple of them is things like cans on the go. So if people pick up a can in a convenience store and take a sip, that's not so much of a natural action. It could be now, but it wasn't months ago. So it was understanding what's seen as a hygiene risk in terms of all of our different packaging. Some of the things are everybody switching to online shopping. We have a huge market out there for small baskets and impulse purchases and things with meal deals and people on their lunch breaks. So now we have to replace all of that and get into baskets online, which is not an easy task. And then one more point around the healthy living, which is quite interesting to think about, is that people were aware of both the physical and mental health. So in terms of physical health, we assume people might want to cut down on sugary drinks. So some of our categories were taking quite a hit. But at the same time, people were looking after their physical health. And so we get to this indulgence versus essential categories in terms of food and drink. So if you're trying to reenact a cinema night at home, maybe that would be a place for some of our more premium mixers or carbonated soft drinks. So there's lots of things at play. So what we did was we created an agile team. So we're working in agile methodologies. We use sprints, we use scrums to really roll out all of the insights to the business as soon as we possibly could. So these are just a few screenshots from our dashboard. So we kept it really simple. What we wanted to do was just establish what the key business questions are throughout the business and for our stakeholders. And so we had sort of three main themes. We talked about how people were feeling and their attitudes, how their consumption behavior had changed, and how their shopping habits changed. And obviously we do a lot of work around all of the different categories and channels. So the shopping and consumption is focused on how people perceive packaged water now versus how people might have perceived a coffee from a can. And then how stable are all of these categories? How stable are the channels? And there's lots and lots of work in that we could go into, but I think focusing more on the emotional side will be more relevant to all of you and all of your different businesses. So I will dip into some of the findings that we have and how we created a framework based on people's emotion and how they were reacting to the pandemic. So consumer response, I'm going to focus on the UK just because of time. We work with 14 different markets in Western Europe. So I'll just go for the UK for now. So I thought it was helpful to just recap on some key moments for the UK. So in March is when we went into lockdown. By April, we had our highest daily death tolls. And then May, we start to ease lockdown. And by June, we can meet in groups of 6. We're allowed outside. People are starting to enjoy summer a little bit again. So what I will look at is a quick look at pre-lockdown emotion, and then a look at emotions and what we learned throughout lockdown and in the easing of lockdown. So pre-lockdown, we found that consumers were generally split between two main reactions, it's really interesting to look back now, but we found that 50% of people were generally quite worried about the situation. So the impact on the country, their personal safety and their finances. And the other 50% seem to be in denial. And we put this largely down to people thought that the media were just exaggerating the extent of coronavirus. So people were very split. However, the whole majority of our sample, the majority of people we spoke to, did remain optimistic that this would be over and done with within the next 2 to 6 months. So 2 months seems like a very small number when we look back now, but that's how people were feeling at the time. And another interesting thing that we found is of those people who were spending more time inside, their screen time had gone up to almost 8 hours a day, which is crazy. To be glued to a screen, because this is on a phone, so it's not necessarily when you're at work. This is phone or a TV. So it wasn't all for the news, it was sometimes for entertainment. So maybe people were on Facebook or catching up with family and friends, but a lot more time spent on digital devices. Oh, yeah. There we go. So if we look into throughout lockdown and the easing of lockdown, 4% of people claim that they had lost their job, which is still a huge number of people if this is a nationally representative sample. And a third have been impacted. So this means that they either had a reduction in pay or a change in pay, or they had a new routine or new working hours. So it's a lot of people having to find a new way of living. And we found that 35% of people were moderately or highly anxious. So a huge number of people across the country really feeling the effects of the lockdown. And then we asked people, sort of, how confident are you feeling? So we asked them confidence in a couple of different scenarios. So we create a confidence index, which is based on the current and future financial perception and the current cost of living, along with the beliefs about the future cost of living. And so for the UK, we see that that took quite a dive in the first few weeks or month of lockdown. And then it did start to pick up slightly, but in a lot of the data that I pulled for the UK, we are consistently below Western Europe in terms of how comfortable we're feeling and how safe we're feeling. But what did we do with all of this data? So by understanding our consumer situations, it allowed us to map them to 4 different consumer groups. So here in this example, they look quite even, but that's not the case. And what we do is we continue to update these consumer groups so we can see the shift in size. So we have consumer sentiment on one side and purchasing power across the bottom. So I'm not sure if you can see my mouse if I hover over. But here you have the most impacted group in the bottom left-hand corner. So they were likely to be living paycheck to paycheck already. And now they have an impact on their purchasing power plus quite negative sentiment. So they're likely to make the most changes to their routine. And then if we do top left, they have been impacted financially, but they overall have quite low anxiety levels, quite a positive sentiment. And so the thing that's going to change the most for them is going to be around price. Top right, we have the least impacted group. So they are feeling positive, they're feeling fine, and they also have a high purchasing power. So great for them in this scenario, but not a huge group, and minimal changes to their routine. And then you have bottom right hand side, high purchasing power, however quite a low sentiment. So even though they have cash flow, it's all good there, they are worried about the future, and so they're either saving that or they're trying to figure out what the future means for them. And so how this affects our brands, our categories, and our offerings is understanding what the motivations of these people will be, not just how much money they have to spend, but how they're feeling and how they might spend that money. So we do see that price is important for all 3 consumer groups. Here, because they've been impacted by, sorry, on the left side, in case you can't see my mouse, because they've been impacted financially. And the bottom right, they haven't been impacted financially, but they are really worried about the future. So they are likely to make trade-offs, remove luxury items, and focus more on health and quality. These guys at the top, they have quite a positive sentiment. So in terms of social distancing and how they want to make changes to their life, or eating out and going to the cinema, they might not make that many changes. So experience is important for them. In the bottom left-hand corner here, this is where we'll see probably the most changes. This consumer really relies on value. They may switch out to cheaper products. They'll probably reduce the frequency of purchase. They probably won't use expensive convenience stores. They'll probably do one big shop a week. So we can really map all of our different offerings here. And what we also look at is the moments throughout the day when people are consuming our brands. So we base all of our strategy. Sorry, I'm not sure if anybody's trying to say something. If not, I'll carry on.
I don't think so, Lauren, carry on.
Oh, okay. So yes, we base our strategy around consumption moments. And so what we are constantly doing is looking at how these have changed. So what this graph shows is the past week consumption of all of our brands, all summed up, and then within that moment versus that moment 4 weeks ago. So hopefully that makes sense. So routine meals at home, eating out and socializing out of the home, work, study and travel out of home are all negative. We've got about a 40% loss there compared to 4 weeks ago. But we do see that special meals at home is growing. So we're not exactly making back our consumption in special meals. It's not like people are just switching out our products and instead of having them outside, inside the home. So there's still work to do there in terms of how we encourage people to be drinking our brands whilst they're working from home or in their routine meals. But where we can really focus is the special meals at home. And this ties in with the health trend that I mentioned earlier on the indulgence and people wanting a sort of sweet treat or trying to recreate date nights at home or restaurant food within the home. And then I just thought I would give you a quick look at how people are feeling about post-lockdown, post-pandemic. So one thing to know is that we've sort of changed our questions throughout. So as things change with the situation, we can change the questions in our questionnaire and then reflect that data in our reporting and in the dashboard. So it's not something, it's not static. It continues to change throughout time. So that's another way we've been working in an agile manner to just really make sure that we are up to date with the constantly changing situation. So if we ask consumers what are they comfortable doing right now, we have 11% are comfortable not maintaining social distancing. So a very small number. We also have only a quarter of people who are happy to work from the office again, and a third of people who are happy to be eating out. So it does seem like most of our consumers are still happy to be at home and maintaining social distancing, definitely. And when we look at holiday behaviour, we have 63% of Brits claim that they will continue with their usual plans. So we love Christmas in this country. It seems like people don't want to make changes there. However, 30% of people have claimed that they will spend less money this Christmas. So if your business is centered around the holidays, people will, a big number of people will still be doing their usual routine, but there's probably less purchasing power there. People will still be looking for value. And when we look at, will life ever be normal again? We ask consumers, what do you think will be different to pre-crisis? And around half of our consumers think that work, social life and leisure will all be different. So it's covering quite a lot. And the highest there is almost 60% of people that say that leisure activities after lockdown will be different. So again, if your business is centered around people being out of the home, people are expecting some change. And so at least there's a little bit of wiggle room in that people aren't going to expect it to be exactly like it was before. But what that change is, we are not sure yet. And so just some quick takeaways that I would suggest is to really connect with your consumers' emotions and their needs. So like I said, our strategy is all around motivations and wants and needs. And I think it's very important, especially at this time. So here you have a sort of hierarchy of needs, physiological needs being food, water, rest, shelter, very basic things. Safety needs are your health, yourself, health of your family, employment, and things that you just need in life to keep going. And I think a lot of people in the UK were quite comfortable in these two needs, and so they were addressing needs number 3 and needs number 4. But that's been turned on its head, and now people are really going back to basics in terms of hygiene and how they're spending their time. And it's just made us sort of rethink how we live our lives in each day. And so I think it's just really knowing who your consumers are. So think back to that grid, think back to how they've been impacted in terms of their financial losses or gains, and also how are they feeling right now, and how do they usually connect with your business or your service, and how might that change or evolve, and how might that need change and evolve over time. And that is everything from me.
Thanks very much, Lauren. That's great. What I'll do is I'm going to pass to Dan, and then we'll take questions at the end, if that's okay, Lauren. I know I've got some questions for you. Thank you very much for your presentation. So Dan, over to you.
Thank you, Jess, and thank you, Lauren. That was a good presentation, and yeah, a lot of the insights you've seen, especially across this part of EMEA, we've witnessed in other areas as well. So good to know our data hasn't been off in comparison to someone else's. That's good to corroborate. So let me just share the screen. Screen 2. There it is. So, right, should have gone full screen for everyone, Jess?
Yeah, that's great, Dan.
Great. So kind of building off what Lauren greatly covered is how we can actually adapt to those user behavior changes, and how with something we do for SEO and just general marketing, and that's bridging the new gap between the user expectations and how we can help forecast more realistic expectations for them and then fulfill that. Because we've all marketing since the start of time, as I'll go on to show, the biggest disconnect between any product service offering, both B2B and B2C, is matching the fulfillment of a user expectation or customer expectation with that. And the pandemic has definitely turned on its head. So a kind of couple of obligatory slides, a little bit about me. I'm Trinity alumni, 2013, currently head of R&D at SALT. We've got an office in Leeds, London, Boston. In terms of research, I was winner of the 2018 Tech SEO Boost Innovation Award, which was over in Boston. Speaking wise on the SEO circuit, I've been very fortunate to do a lot of traveling and see a lot of cities and speak to a lot of different people, including Moscow, which is a very lovely city if anyone ever gets a chance to go. I write for a few blogs. I've been also fortunate to be on the top 140 global list a couple of times as well. And yeah, I specialize more in demand generation than just pure SEO, because SEO has got very varying degrees of what SEO actually is. So a little bit as well, consultancy. So everything I'm kind of going to show today are learnings in matching and better forecasting the experiences from some companies I've worked with. And as I'm pretty sure you can imagine,
You've just gone on to mute, Dan.
Yeah, I tried to pop up saying someone had muted me. Oh well. So looking about, one of them has had probably a worse pandemic than the other two, but again, it's about rematching that and building the customer experience back. But the important thing about understanding the changes in consumer behaviour is also understanding what the change is and what the change catalyst is. So change catalysts are essentially when a marketplace has an increased innovation term. So these are everything from the introduction of the iPhone in 2006, the introduction of Google in 2008, and then everything else in between was basically changed how users behave and how users react. The manifestation of this, however, is the increased expectation of users. So it's not necessarily the introduction of a new phone or a new piece of technology. It's how that impacts and changes the user expectation for other things around it that already existed and other things to follow. So to kind of put this into context of how much COVID has kind of been this change velocity, this is the obligatory big graph slide that all SEOs do, but this shows in the UK the percentage of households that owned a computer versus the number of households who had internet installed. And there's spotty data pre-97, but effectively they correlate quite nicely as it became more amenable for internet. And even now we're still at 96% penetration for internet installation just in this time. But if you think when the smartphone first came out, that was 2006 when Apple first dropped the first iPhone. And then, because obviously you see exponential growth in internet, you don't see the same with computer because people don't need that. There's different change catalysts. People move to tablet, people move to other machines. So it's about understanding how the different change catalysts play with each other. COVID, on the other hand, has taken that graph and exponentiated it. So IBM's retail index, which looks across a really large number of economic scores, I've pretty much predicted that in the past first 6 to 7 months of the COVID pandemic, that accelerated the growth of the user journey from offline to online by about 5 years. Obviously, different sectors saw different variations of growth than others, but essentially, people moved online, people already moving online, people didn't have a choice but to move online. And it's that restriction of choice which led to the exponential growth in this area. The issue with this is that's just the mechanism. The manifestation is how users then perceive the online experience around them. And unfortunately, that is set by the larger companies who have benefited from this, like Amazon, eBay, all the large companies you can think of who do basically everything because they've set the benchmark for user experience. They've set the benchmark for delivery, promotion, customer service, all aspects, not just of marketing, but in terms of product delivery and service delivery as well. And that's also part of when we do marketing and when we try get users to convert through organic search and SEO, all that has to be taken into account. A lot of businesses at this stage do what I call, and they hit the digital transformation panic button, where essentially they look for the immediate quick fix and the silver bullet to do everything. The 4 more common ones are building new websites, going international and building a global presence, which I've had conversations with people wanting to do that over the last 3 months, and some going, oh, we think there's going to be great demand in China. And I went, great, who's going to do all your customer service? It's like, oh, we'll be fine. Like, you've got no one in the business who speaks Chinese and no one who's going to be working when your Chinese consumers are online. Let's just look at the process and take it back. Social again, because social works for some businesses, social works for a lot of products and services, but not for all. But again, social can be seen as one of the panic buttons. And then branding, again, rebranding, changing the logo is to appeal to a different audience, but in reality there's underlying things which can be done before you hit the panic button and completely re-overhaul the entire thing. Going back to completely basics is the way to go around this in plugging the user experience gap. So this is one of my favourite pieces of marketing. This is the first known recorded piece of print marketing that ever existed, and it's between 1100 and 750 odd years old, and it's from China. And essentially the messaging is exactly the same as the kind of messaging we put across in every marketing communication now, and that's that they have a high quality, I don't know if people can see my mouse, but they have a high quality input material, they produce a fine quality product, and they're ready for delivery and automatic use. So immediately, good quality input, good quality output, immediate usage and delivery. That's pretty much what the online model is based on in terms of things like Amazon. You have a product, you have reviews to justify the product's validity, you have your own experience and persuasions you've received from marketing to believe it's a valid product, and you want the fast delivery. It's basic, and this was being done tens of centuries ago. You don't need to hit the panic button just yet. So this is something that I've gone on to, well, not just me, Cole, but it's something called experience forecasting. And this is helping bridge the gap between the new user expectations and what you can fulfill. And we all know that because of increased expectations delivered by the multi-billion conglomerates, that people expect a live chat response at 10 past 10 at night. And you can't do that as a small business. You have to manage it in a certain way, manage customers in that aspect. But for me, that's also understanding that if the consumer has the expectation that you're necessarily going to be responding to a website live chat message at 10 past 10 on a Tuesday evening, they're probably not going to be a customer you're going to be able to maintain and fulfill their forecasted experience for a long period of time. So that's going to end up just leaving them with disappointment and you with a lot of added work, which potentially won't be profitable. So we use experience forecasting essentially when the user's looking to purchase product or service. The two elements you should be focusing on are enabling the forecast and enabling a more accurate forecast for your product and service so the user could better understand the experience they're going to receive. But then the key element is actually then fulfilling it. So there's no point claiming to be a luxury XYZ if the product's actually quite cheap and not luxury on that element. The messaging has to actually match the product that's behind it. The other important element is our variables that you can't control as part of this, because we all know when we're looking around and shopping, or just in general, we're exposed to a lot of persuasions through advertising and marketing, through television, everything TV, even our own experiences. We only control a very small percentage of what a user's actual forecast is and try and align it with what our product is or service. And my last point just on this is that it is a holistic business effort. It's not just down to an SEO, a PPC person, a couple of people in marketing. That alignment is a holistic process, but ultimately can enable not just for marketing efforts, increase custom, but more. So why I talk about this as someone who primarily focuses on organic search is that because over time, we can see how user patterns change, not just in how search queries change, search volumes changed, how Google trends goes up and down, but also in how Google itself as a product is adapting and adding features or removing features to make their search results better, just as a business. Because as rich as Google is, from just going in and typing in a search result, Google doesn't make any money out of its search product. It makes money out of the adverts it injects into the search results pages. So if he starts giving you bad results or negative search experiences, you're going to look elsewhere. You're going to use other search engines. And that's ultimately, for those that can remember 20 years ago, what happened to Ask Jeeves. Despite them pouring millions into television advertising, they couldn't match the same search experience and they were given bad results. We see this even recently, but as Google introduces new features, such as something I've just introduced called passage indexing, where in their own sort of press release style blog post explaining it, they take content directly from a page and just put it directly onto the site or onto their search results even, which is very similar to what we've done previously. But the wording said in this press is they essentially understand that sometimes for users, finding the information they want, and to quote, can be like a needle in a haystack. So it's about having that good experience and enabling that forecasting. Google understands that, I don't know, someone somewhere might have said that you need to have a user spend more time on a page or scroll more or something like that. So users bed content down. And so websites bed content down to create that. Ultimately, it just creates a negative experience. This is why SEO isn't just linear. It's not just keywords, rankings, traffic, conversions. It's about taking that holistic journey and actually mapping it correctly. And being honest, a kind of byproduct of doing this correctly are the rankings, are the traffic, and if done correctly, it's the conversions. It's kind of, rather than optimizing for the symptom, you need to optimize for yourself and then get the symptoms off the back of it. So an example of this, in what even Google's trying to do from last week. So thankfully football's back. I was bored, so I wanted to watch Arsenal play. So I did the quick search, what channel is Arsenal being mauled on? So first result within Google was Radio Times. This is beneath some of their search features. But essentially, so even in the actual title of the page, my actual search query was replicated exactly. What channel is Arsenal being mauled on? Now, typically you look at that and go, okay, it's a standard news site, there's a headline, there's an image, there's text, adverts, all the rest of it. But because someone's probably said somewhere that they need to get a user to scroll for adverts, or they need to get a user to scroll to give Google some good metrics if they had a positive experience, they stuck the actual answer 180 words down the page. To actually get this to fit on the screen, I had to zoom out as far as I could and put this actual screen on a screenshot on a bigger screen just to get it in. That's a negative experience, and in response to this, Google have actually taken that information from Radio Times in this instance and put it directly on the search results page. So they've actually just gone, you know what, we see what you've done, we pulled this out, it's on the search results. Nobody actually needs to click on you anymore to actually find out the answer. This is a negative time to result, it's a negative page experience, it's a complete disjoint between a positive forecast and the experience on it, because I clicked onto that result thinking I only have to scroll a little bit, but actually it was difficult to find because I actually had to read most of the content just for it to stick out because it's not made obvious. So that's why 3 metrics I want to just talk about in more brief detail with enabling these forecasts, rather than with SEO thinking rankings, traffic, and conversions. These are 3 things which are taken from some bigger clients. So you've got MQL, SQL. So this is the marketing qualified leads you get from your website versus how many are actually then tire kickers or waste of time or serious consideration actually convert. By creating a feedback loop between those, especially if you've got a different sales team or people doing different job responsibilities, you can actually then feed back into the marketing equation and reduce the amount of poor leads potentially coming through, meaning your sales team have got more focused leads, more qualified, and they don't have to spend as much time separating the chaff from the wheat. The second one, which is enabled through creating a better forecast between what you can offer and what people want, is the lifetime value by customer acquisition cost. So essentially with this, we all know that acquiring any kind of custom has a cost associated to it. Whether you're doing advertising, it's the amount of time someone spends on the phone in terms of wages, there is a numeric viable cost associated to every sale and lead you make. If you can create a better forecast and have that forecast match what you can fulfill, the lifetime value of that customer then grows, meaning the actual initial cost per acquisition decreases, making multiple marketing channels just more viable, more profitable, and more scalable. And then the third one, which is just a result of a better lifetime value, is a reduction in churn rate, because getting new customers is always a lot more expensive and a lot harder than selling to existing ones. And I've got an example of that in here as well. The important thing with MQL SQL feedback loops in this is something I've called the 60-100 rule. So when I first started off, kind of dull, fresh-faced and rosy cheeks out of uni, I worked for an online tyre company that sold tyres online, but they also had a walk-in option, etc. And essentially, every single person that came into that building, or every single phone call, or every single lead, they chased down that lead and put so much effort into it, like it was the last sale they're ever going to make, and that someone had their family home, and if they didn't leave that sale, that was it. But because they only put 60% of effort into 100% of the leads, the conversion rate was awful, because you just had people who weren't going to spend and worthwhile to put the effort into it, or you were effectively spending an hour of your time for £2-3 in terms of profit, it wasn't worth it. But by structuring it better, by doing better marketing and getting a closer match between your MPL and SQL, you're then able to put 100% of your effort into 60% of the leads, and the conversion rate does go up, even though volume does go down. And because the conversion rate goes up, ultimately it's just more profitable, as long as what you're doing is profitable in the first place anyway. So an example of this, and selling to yourself and selling to that initial qualified usage, is Pearl Jam. So start of the 2000s, MP3s started to really take place. I think the first iPod had come out around that stage as well, and digital music sales were basically the music industry became a lot more accessible to a lot more people through digital and through increased internet, computer usage, etc. Now, I'm introducing a couple of economic terms here. So it relies on two things, that industry. It's for consumer investments, but the time and money. Now, time is referred to economically as inelastic. You've only got 24 hours in a day, 60 minutes in an hour. You physically can't create more time, therefore it's inelastic, whereas money and disposable income is relatively inelastic. Typically, people get into a routine, they have X amount of disposable income, they spend it in a certain way, but they spend it usually with amount, spend it differently. That's where it's got a little bit more give. So Pearl Jam understood this, and between 2001 and 2002, as you can see, they released 72 live music albums, pretty much all targeting their existing consumer base, but all 72 albums made a profit. They understood exactly what experience their users wanted from them. Their users knew what to expect from Pearl Jams. All they did was fulfill it, and they fulfilled it 72 times and made a lot of money. Going out and making new music, trying to mass market, goes for mass media, very difficult to actually do that, very difficult to turn over profit, reach new users. Just as profitable just to stick to what you know and do it that way. By contrast, however, with a lot of products and services, if you don't have a following, or similar to Pearl Jam or that heavy core user-based advocates, it's a step away from something in marketing which I have respect for, but I hate, and that's the persona element of things. Because for me, when you start talking about customer personas, you probably put a large portion of your market into a shadow and you don't focus on them. So with this, and this is going back, so with anyone who's done team sports or office morale building exercises, you're always kind of taught that the team's only as fast as its slowest member. So with this, if your product is specifically going for more educated users because they speak your language, they understand the product, they're a quicker easier sell, there's a massive opportunity cost that you're missing by not focusing for those people. A good example of this is I was down in Reading before lockdown, and I seen a client and they passed the juicings, and I just thought, well, I need to get a hammer actually because I need to put a shelf up this weekend. And I went in and spoke to the guy, and I literally went, because they were remodeling, I couldn't find him, and I just said, can I buy a hammer? And he went, what kind of hammer do you want? And I just went, one for the house. And because I didn't know that, they were able to give you information and give me the correct product. If you don't have that bridge gap, obviously I wouldn't have walked out with a mallet or something stupid, but I probably wouldn't have had the experience fulfilled. And on that basis, well, not all content has to sell. So this is marketing for the fringe personas, content for the wider topic. So this is more problem-led and solution-led elements. So this isn't someone who knows exactly what they want, but they know what their problem is. And if you can match problem to a solution, you can again help with that forecasting of their experience forecast is your product will fill the solution, your service will solve it, let's match it and map it. It also helps, especially with B2B, because I know especially a lot of the time the decision maker, the person you want to influence, isn't the person who has the checkbook. And ultimately both those people are important in that system. And sometimes the person who you are talking to has to go and justify spending that money, especially with boards or C-level or anything like that. If you can produce content to make that conversation a lot easier for them, yeah, you've helped them out, but you've also just probably expedited the amount of effort required on their half to onboard you, sign a contract and make a sale. And then the other elements of that is content to be present as a brand. Basically, you'll see competitors aren't, because if your competitors are paying for searches, they can probably be remarketing through display ads, and he just lets them get a foot in the door and destabilise relationships. So an example of this, just in practice, is one I put in place about 3 years ago with Cloudflare, who, if you know, they're a big San Fran. They do infrastructure elements like DDoS, but they do cybersecurity and content delivery networks. Most of their pretty much their entire market is development engineers, system admins, it's IT people. But a lot of the decision makers in businesses and a lot of money and a lot of high proportion of market aren't people who understand every aspect of Anycast networks and infrastructure and all the jazz and words I'm not going to say because it will just confuse people. But through a learning centre, going as fast as the slowest person, they can create product accessibility and brand visibility across that as well. And there's hesitancy in doing this, but to give you an idea of what those learning centres did, just in terms of just organic, one learning centre for distributed denial of service protection has about 180,000 ranking keywords, about 1.7 million organic visitors, just to one set of, I think it's about 112 pages now, and that's just one small part of the site, which gets people in, channels people, passes them through as leads. This was all missed traffic and missed opportunity and missed brand exposure because they were focusing purely on targeted personas. I appreciate I'm running on time, Jess, so I'm going to speed up. So
just a few minutes, Dan, so we got time for questions. That would be great.
I'll wrap up soon. So an easy way of doing this as well, especially a small business is essentially you want your reviews anyway. You want to justify and show testimonials to help reinforce, build trust with other businesses and other leads. But you can use those reviews for content and as well as leading the experience. So with a review, people essentially review 3 different areas. They have a brand experience, which can be everything from, I don't know, I bought a Gucci handbag and it was high quality, therefore brand has fulfilled messaging. The customer experience, so that's everything from the website was easy to use, the live chat person was friendly, the person on the phone didn't sound like they didn't want me there. Even through the product experience of the instructions clear, easy setup, fulfilled need, etc. As described, all the nice things. But essentially, if you can, but with reviews, you'll probably be sending out questionnaires, feedback surveys. You can kind of tailor the questions around that based on what people bought, and also based on a subset. You can specifically ask leading questions around, if you know someone used a phone and spoke to someone at the business, how that call went, how that helped them with their journey, etc. If it's around the product specifically, if you know if it was someone based up in somewhere cold, etc. You can use the information you've already got from a product database to lead the questions, then use that content on your website. So when other people are looking at reviews and the experiences, there's things that people are going to say in reviews you're never going to think to put in content. But again, that helps the user forecast their experience better, aligning with what you can offer. And that's everything. So thank you for everyone's time and for letting me ramble on. A couple of links to a couple of sites I'm on there, but I'll pass back to Jess. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dan. Really rich data and information there and good breadth, and from you as well, Lauren. So I'm going to pass back to the floor for questions. Nick, Wayne, I can see you've got a question. Would you like to ask Dan directly?
Yeah, hi Dan. Thank you for the presentation. My question was, have you noticed a preponderance of features being the dominant element of content, and that the business that's put that content out is actually missing out in describing the benefits to the customer?
Yeah, it's a great question, and 100%. I mean, the one thing which I say to a lot of business owners is typically people don't care mainly about the features. They don't care if something's the fastest, the shiniest, or the best. What they care about is whether or not it's a solution to their end. Yeah, exactly that. And this is why review strategy plays quite well into this, because it's all right, the company's saying it, but if you know that if you sell a bicycle, for example, you know that someone's going to enjoy the bicycle XYZ, you can incentivize through coupons, through other things, and say, oh, upload your experience and upload pictures. Then naturally, not your business saying it, you'll gain other end users to help other users go, oh, look, you can ride a bike on a canal. And even that sounds really basic, but just putting that as a visual stimulus is what people don't think about. But yeah, no, great question, 100%. Yeah, it's a massive opportunity cost just talking about the product and not the solution and fulfillment.
Thank you. Does anyone else have a question? Putting you on the spot now. While I'm waiting and see if people want to put a question in the chat, I was going to ask Lauren. You talked a lot about researching around how people are feeling during this pandemic, and I suppose it's the first time ever we've had one common denominator that we can measure how people are feeling. Do you think that's going to change the way market research goes forward?
I mean, it's within a business, it means all of your benchmarks are changing. I know that there are market research companies out there that have had studies running for years that always ask people how they're feeling. So they'll be able to do some huge analysis on how it's made people feel whenever the end of this might be. But yeah, I think it probably does. It's something you have to take into account on all the projects now, and whatever it might be. You're always thinking, but what is the influence of COVID and how that's made people feel, and trying to weigh up just how much influence it's had. So yeah, I think it probably will change until we find out what that new benchmark is.
It feels a lot more human, doesn't it? Even just seeing everyone in their homes just feels like the business world has become more personal. Johnny, Ross, you've got a question for Lauren?
Yeah, hi Lauren and Dan, both very interesting, thank you. But specifically to Lauren, how are you going to get people to put your products in their online trolley? What do you think the key thing is going to be to actually make that happen? And secondly, which channel, if you don't mind me asking, which online channel do you spend the most money on?
I don't know the answer to the second question. It's a huge business, as you know, so the people that deal with the online stuff is probably like a giant team in themselves. So I know that the strategy is focusing on those consumption moments, like I said. So we do a lot of drinks with meals, and there's a lot of advertising around which pushes here's the ideal drink for this meal. And so there's lots of stuff happening with online retailers of suggested drinks, but I don't know who we spend the most money with. Sorry.
Thank you.
That's all right, thank you.
And then I wanted to ask, we've got Christmas is coming, holidays are coming, so I wanted to know, Lauren, about the Coca-Cola campaign for Christmas, and also Dan, have you seen any have you seen any patterns in how people are changing their approach to Christmas marketing and sales, etc.? Don't know, Lauren, if you want to go first.
I actually haven't seen anything for this year's Christmas ad yet. I know that they have been testing some stuff, but I assume it'll just be the traditional holidays are coming. I'm not being very helpful, am I? It's really hard because we work in such, there's like a whole team dedicated to the Christmas ad, and they haven't circulated anything internally yet. So I'm guessing it will be holidays are coming. So.
I wonder if they're, instead of being on a train outside, they might be all inside having a lockdown Christmas. Dan, what about you?
So if being honest with some clients, especially in the US, we started talking about Christmas in July, which is never fun because it just, I mean, I know I complain when people see Christmas sweets in October, but it's gone when you work in marketing. It's kind of been a mixed bag. Some of the larger e-commerce retailers I work with in the US are kind of doing business as usual, but they're throttling back a little bit on the kind of Black Friday, Cyber Monday, Cyber Week stuff, because that usually is quite big in the US because it coincides with Thanksgiving quite well, and then they've got the big advertising around all the American football and all the other sports and the multi-billion-dollar industry buys. UK side, it's probably been more reserved from what I've seen, because there's been that uncertainty element. But there's been definitely a massive shift in trying to get infrastructure in place and messaging early for even like, I mean, the sofa companies, I think, started it already. The Christmas delivery kind of adverts have already started. So there's definitely an increase in messaging. I don't think there's going to be an increase in. I think from what I've seen, we're all kind of hoping that by January everything's going to be open again and people could hit the January sales hard, and we're probably going to see a larger January than what we have like Fridays and Christmas as well.
That's interesting. So finally then, for you both, just one thing. What one thing would you recommend businesses to go away and do, just from what you've seen, what you've heard, what the research tells you? What one thing can people do for their businesses?
From me, I think it would be to understand all of your consumers in the best way that you can. So obviously, we had a great opportunity that we had the money and we can track and we can speak to people every single day. And if you don't have that, then I suppose it's just trying to understand what your consumer base was already and the types of socioeconomic groups they might fall into, and then how they've been affected. Because I think saying that, like, how much you earn does reflect how much you have to spend. People have different commitments, people have different lives, but I think that just trying to understand all of the different situations that has affected your consumer will give you a better lens. Thank you, Lauren. And very quickly, Dan?
I'm not like Lauren pretty much hit the nail on the head there. Henry said nail hit the Lauren on the head. But yeah, it's about understanding not only what your existing customer base was, but what they're doing now and what their shift has been. And if they've shifted more to online, or they've moved to a different supplier, competitor, or even just like gone down the rabbit hole of Amazon or something like that, it's how you can re-engage with a messaging and bring them back.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And just a reminder that this is recorded, so people can go back. Christopher will be sending that out after the event, so you can go back and watch it, because there was lots of technical language that Dan used, which I might need to go and look up and then review. And just to close off, thank you all for coming. Christopher and I have looked at the next session that was supposed to be our Christmas party, and we thought there's some things you just can't replicate on screen, so we thought everyone will be busy. We might remove that one from the diary, but we do want to do one in January, and we want it to be of real use to you all. So what we want to do is put together a panel of experts answering questions that people have and solving problems that people have. So in our follow-up, we'll be sending out an email following this with an opportunity for you to ask questions or tell us what your bugbears are, what your pain points are, and we will try and get those answered in the January panel. So hopefully you'll join us for that. And Christopher asked me to remind everyone there is a session tomorrow for Adventure, which is officially for companies less than 3 years old, but I'm sure they would welcome others. But there's a session by our own video expert, Mark Willett, on video making for your business. So Christopher, presumably you'll send a link for that too. So I just want to thank my speakers again, Dan and Lauren. Virtual round of applause for you. Awesome. And thanks everyone for coming. Stay well, stay safe, and look forward to seeing you the next time. Thanks very much. And thanks, Christopher, of course, for pulling it all together. See you. Bye.